What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another GGF case review, and today I'll be taking a look at the FLUX M from Antec. Now this recently launched on Amazon, I think this week, and then Antec also officially launched it on their website, I think 2 weeks ago. So this is an affordable mATX chassis, and it's actually good to be able to downsize for once and review something a little bit different, a little bit smaller. I think the last thing I did check out that was relatively similar to this was the Lian Li, the 11 Mini V2. So we're going to go through, check out this case, and see if I can do a custom loop. The Antec FLUX M is an affordable mATX chassis and designed with airflow in mind. Outside aesthetics are clean, nothing over the top, and case materials consist of steel for the main chassis frame and plastic for the feet and cover strip that runs along the front. I was really hoping this was some sort of metal, but it is not. Case dimensions come in at 365 high, 245 wide, and 450 deep. Definitely not the smallest mATX chassis around, but Antec aren't trying to rival cases like the Lian Li A3, and custom water cooling is quite possible in the FLUX M. For color options, the FLUX M only comes in black, no white variants. Also in the included price tag, which I'll cover later, the chassis comes pre-installed with 6 fans, yes 6, 3 120mm ARGB fans, 2 front and 1 rear, while 3 non-ARGB reverse flow fans can be found at the bottom for GPU cooling. Interestingly, Antec have mixed ARGB with non-ARGB fans, and I want to know how you feel about this. The case is raised 21mm off the ground to help those 3 bottom intake fans, while the front sports complete mesh for air intake. 2 dust filters can be found, one large magnetic one at the bottom, which can be a bit tricky to remove and install. Then the second dust filter can be found at the top, which probably isn't needed. This dust filter is also magnetic and cleans up the whole top area of the chassis, so this is probably why Antec implemented one up here. No dust filter can be found at the front, as the mesh grill does kind of act as its own filter, although I would have liked to have seen one on the back panel for the PSU intake. The main tempered glass side panel is 4mm thick, has a very light tint, and is 100% toolless, slots in at the bottom, and locks in via 2 pushing clips. I found once the panel was in, it was super tight and had no fear of it accidentally coming off. A small notch can be found at the back at the top to help remove this panel. The back side panel is made from steel and slides off by 2 non-captive thumb screws. Front area can be found at the front right, and here you'll find a single USB Type-C 10GB, single USB 3.0 Type-A, audio combo port, power and reset button. It's good to see Antec sticking with the reset button, as many brands I've looked at recently have been removing them. Inside the FLUX M, you find a pretty standard layout, but the PSU has been shifted to the front and protrudes into the main section of the chassis. I find this is neat, as this area normally isn't used anyway, and this means overall the case ends up being smaller, as the extra space for the PSU at either the top, bottom or rear has been removed. For motherboard support, you'll find up to mATX as well as RTX motherboards. Plenty of cable cutouts can be found along the top, bottom and right side of the motherboard tray, but you'll probably notice no cable grommets can be found. I actually think on a case this size, they probably aren't needed, and I kind of like this look. One thing that might be a downside for some is that there is no back-connect motherboard support in the FLUX M. Having the PSU already out of the way means back-connect would have been an easy move in the chassis for Antec, and you can see that Fantex have already added it in their very similar XT-M3. For clearances, there is 405mm for GPU length, and you can see with my test ROG 5090 Astral, there is plenty of room. One thing to note with certain mATX motherboards and the PCIe config, with my test TUF B850M motherboard, the primary PCIe slot is one space down, meaning thick GPUs like this 76mm thick 5090 Astral will rest right on the pre-installed fans. Anything thicker like this 5080 Noctua will need to have the bottom fans removed. Now after swapping motherboards to something like this Strix B850-G, where the primary slot is in the first position, I now had no issues installing my test 5080 Noctua while keeping the bottom fans installed. While for waterlock GPUs, there is 170mm for GPU width, and my test TUF 5080 with an Alphacool block installed with no issues at all. Antec have also included an anti-sag bracket, and I must admit this one is pretty basic with just up and down control. I had no issues using it with my test ROG 5090 Astral, but keep in mind, as it has limited adjustability, it may fail on different brands' GPU fans, or if the GPU has a curved design, it may miss the video card altogether. And for CPU cooler height, there is 175mm of clearance here. Around the back, we find a rather different layout to what we're used to. As I said earlier, the PSU is moved towards the front, and a power extension cable is used to bring the power back to the rear. For installing a power supply, the top access cover needs to be removed, and this will provide access to the 4 screw holes as well as plugging in the PSU power cable. Power supply length is roughly up to 160mm, so be mindful if you're installing a beefy long PSU. I do like the cable management space below the PSU, which is hidden behind a removable cover. Storage in the FLUX M is pretty simple, with a single tray directly behind the motherboard. This tray can take either two 2.5-inch SSDs or two 3.5-inch hard drives, or you can mix and match and have one of each. Some things to take note here: the storage bracket only has hole spacing for hard drives, utilizing the center screw hole. Out of all my spare hard drives, I have only one that has the center hole config, so be mindful of that. Other drives will install fine, they just won't have the full 4-screw support. And secondly, drives go on the inside of this bracket, eating up a bit of cable management space behind the motherboard. Rear cable management looks promising, with a good 40mm of clearance behind the motherboard tray, and then there's the area under the PSU. I also counted 11 cable tie-down points as well, and I'll go over how cable management went in the outro once the build is completed. Moving on to all-in-one cooler support, the FLUX M primary location is at the top, supporting up to a 360mm AIO, and then after that, you are good to go, as the rest of the chassis is already populated with fans. I had no issues installing my test Antec Skeleton 360 all-in-one cooler. For custom radiator support, the two main locations are going to be the top and the bottom. The front dual 120mm fan spot is just too narrow, as it's just wide enough for fans, plus it's so low to the bottom of the chassis it would conflict with the bottom radiator spot. The top location has 60mm of clearance to my test motherboard for radiator and fans. Here I was able to comfortably install an Alphacool HardTube 360 radiator with fans. You can get away with more than 60mm of clearance, as the fans can run down past the motherboard. The bottom location can also fit a 360mm radiator, but clearance here will depend on your motherboard's PCIe slot. If your motherboard's primary PCIe is in the top slot, then there's roughly 85mm of clearance for radiator and fans to my test TUF 5080 with an Alphacool block. Here I could install another Alphacool HardTube 360 radiator with fans. If your motherboard's primary PCIe is in the second slot down, there's roughly 65mm of clearance, and I can now only fit an Alphacool HardTube 360 radiator with fans. Alrighty guys, like always, let's check out the final build. So that is the final build. I'm pretty stoked at how this came out. I think it came out much better than what I was expecting. And you might be wondering, why would you go to all the effort to custom water cool such an affordable case? I'll cover the price later on towards the end of this video. But I don't really sort of justify when I want a custom water cool going by the price of the chassis. I don't really think that has anything to do with it. I always like to water cool in a range of cases. Some of the cases behind me are worth $3,000–4,000 US. They are aimed at water cooling. Yes, they're nice to water cool, but it's also good to sort of tone it down a bit and water cool in something like this. Now, in saying that, I'm not going to always do custom loops in cases that aren't really designed for custom water cooling. Now, I think this case has some pretty good options for custom water cooling. You can see I got 360 rad on the bottom, 360 rad at the top. I did have to do a bit of slight modding for the 120 Reservoir, but it does have some pretty good support. Now, I'm not going to force custom water cooling in cases that are designed for all-in-one coolers, like we recently saw that Corsair Air 5400. Other cases that are designed for air cooling that have like air ducts for your air-cooled GPUs. I'm not going to force water cooling onto those, but I think this one was pretty good. I'll talk a little bit more about the build later on, but building in this chassis was fine. I had no issues at all. Rear cable management around the back was really good. I thought it was going to be good as I was testing this case, but I always like to do this final part of the video once the build is actually done. You can see all the cables are down the bottom. Now, I've probably got a little bit more than say like an all-in-one or an air-cooled build. I've got all these fans. I've got the 2 tubes that go to the back. You can see the bottom of the FLT reservoir there. Those 2 pass-throughs go to the back. I have soft tube linking that. It runs along hidden like I do in a lot of my builds. 1 tube at the back goes to this port on the GPU, and then the other soft tube goes to the back port on this bottom radiator at the back there. So I got that. Also extra cables for the, I think these are the Geforce extension cables for, you can see, for the 24 pin, the GPU and the dual EPS. I think they're called the Hydrus or something like that. They have a little RGB oval in the center of them. Very nice, very eye-catching, but they all require a single RGB connection each. So this one at the back has an RGB connection. The 24 pin has an RGB connection, and same with the EPS. So I have a bunch of cables there. Then there's a bunch of RGB for all of the fans. We'll talk about these SiC fans later on. RGB for those, then RGB for all the blocks. There's basically 1, 2, 3 if you include the pump res combos also. A lot of cables, no issues at all, and the back looks pretty clean for the amount of gear that I've got. Now, the only, I wouldn't say an issue with the stock case when it comes, the fan cables, I wouldn't say they're messy. They are nicely routed around the chassis, but you do get a massive just wad of cables. I think something like a hub might have been a better implementation, but then again, that's going to increase the cost. But you can see in this video, there are just a bunch of cables because they've just linked them all together, just sitting there at the back at the bottom. Another thing I mentioned earlier, if you did miss it, is no back connect support. Now, for some people, that might be a downside. I think MSI, I know Zeus does. I think they only have a white BTF board, so you're probably not going to use this in this chassis because it only comes in the black SKU model. But I think MSI have some, and I think Aorus may have mATX back connect boards. So if you're looking at that, this case does not support the back connect. And I think that's pretty much it on this case. Before I go over the specs and a little bit about this build, no real issue at all. Want to cover price? You're looking at $75 US for this case, and that comes with the 6 fans, the 3 RGB. I want to know your thoughts on that as well. 3 RGB comes with 2 at the front, 1 at the rear, and then the 3 non-RGB reverse flow at the bottom. Now, it's just me, I'm not saying this for everyone, but I've always disliked it when cases come with mismatched fans. Like, the frame is the same, but just having 3 RGB and then 3 non-RGB, I think is just a little bit different, and it just looks a little bit weird. Now, I did swap the fans out, not really because of that. I think the build still would look pretty good, but I did want to use Alphacool. I did a recent video on a bunch of Alphacool gear I received, and then I did get a second batch of Alphacool gear with these really sick fans, and I was already going to use the GPU block, CPU block, then the pump res combo. Then I thought, hey, let's throw these fans in and just finish it off with all Alphacool. They look super, super sick. Now, I do want to talk about the build itself. So I did mention all Alphacool water cooling. It does have the new Apex Stealth fans. They are the new ARGB ones. I think they had the normal metal non-ARGB ones probably about a year or so ago. These ones are brand new, come in black, silver, and white. I wasn't quite sure how the silver would look, so I kind of tied it in with some other things they have, like their Apex 1 CPU block does have a bit of silver trim on it. The GPU block has a bit of silver trim on it. This is the 5080 tough block, and then also the chrome tubing I implemented. So I did add a bit of silver to try and tie it in with the black as well. Instead of just going with the black fans, I wanted to do something a little bit different. Now, mind you, they don't have reverse flow. I think reverse flow would have been the icing on the cake for those fans. I don't have that. I did print out my own sticker with my vinyl cutter for the, I would say, the ugly side of the fan. So when you have normal fans that are blowing intake, you normally see the ugly side, which has like branding, like some specs. I think they say that the DC voltage and all that. I threw a black sticker on there I made up. I do think I did make the AC logo a little bit too big. If I was doing it again, I would tone that down so it's not just so much in your face. But if you did see the B-roll of this build, they don't actually look like that with the big AC black circle with the white AC logo. But as I said, I would have liked to have done that a little bit smaller after I saw the footage. Our CPU is 9800X3D, so it's a bit of a beast of a system. 9800X3D, then the 5080 tough. The reservoir pump res combo is the Alphacool Rise Flat. That's actually their older generation. They have moved over to their core series. I don't have one of those. They've got the core series in the 120, 240 and all the way up, but that's their slightly older one. And then that just looks really nice there. The only little bit of modding I had to do was mount the Rise flat reservoir on there. That's pretty simple. Because it's 120, the mounting is exactly 120. So whenever you want to mount something like that, that's 120, you can just use a fan. So I just used one of the fans I took off, placed it over the PSU shroud. I obviously use like painter's tape. Painter's tape is good to put over everything before you start working, because you're going to start scratching stuff you don't want to get scratched. Once I did that, just line the fan up and then you can just drill straight through 4 holes and then that lines up perfectly. I did add some little standoffs to rise it out a bit, because I didn't want it flat right against that sort of PSU shroud cover bulge that sticks out there. And that's pretty much it for that. Rads are the Alphacool HB360. Top is 45, bottom is 30. Probably could have gone 45 at the bottom if I didn't have to have this bottom port on the GPU. If I went at the top and not used anything at the bottom, I could have gone with 45, but hey, I don't think we really need it. The cooling is pretty good here. And then I decided not to go with a 240 rad at the front. Earlier, I mentioned that 240 rad is going to be tough in this case, because at the front, it's very, very narrow, only enough for really 120mm fans. So there's not many brands that do radiators that are pretty much the same with this fans. Most of them are wider. So that's why I stuck with just the fans, just for fresh air coming in. But I think that's it. Not an overly long one this time, but I think this case is good, easy to work in. I really do like some of the implementation around the back for the cable management, but there is going to be some tough competition. You've got cases like the Fantex XTM3, which is very, very similar. They do offer a glass version or an air version, and then that comes with some bands as well. But that one does come in white, and it also has back connect. And then you got cases like the Lian Li 011 Mini V2. That's a little bit more. I think that's $100. That comes with some fans, but we all know that case is very versatile, and it does have ATX motherboard support. So I guess it's going to come down to you, your choice of case. But if you like this one, this is definitely a nice case to work with. But anyway, I do want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank Antec for sending this out to check out. It's been great building in it, and we'll see you in the next one.